Hey you gang, we are in Indiana today. Beautiful morning. Mishawaka, just about 5 or 6 miles east of South Bend, Indiana. And we're at the Mishawaka City Cemetery here. And we are here to visit a really interesting grave. One that drew me to come here. Hey, thank you, Kimberly, our friend Kimberly. Gave me the story just a couple of days ago, and sometimes when I get some of these stories I just have to rush out because it's an intriguing story. It reminds me of the story of Mary Bibb in Huntsville, Alabama. Remember the story where she was buried in a rocking chair? This is a similar kind of story, and I don't think this is a well-known story. She's more of a well-known story, but let's go walk over. It's an underground vault. It's really strange what's in there, and we're going to talk about it. And on the way, let's look at some interesting stones. It's a very old cemetery here in Mishawaka. Yeah, the guy's name was Willard Aldrich, and he was quite an eccentric. You know, we run into these kind of stories, they usually are, right? So it was 1882 when Willard passed away, and he's down in this underground vault that we're going to see. Well, we'll see the top of it, and it is said that he is interred down there in this big vault, kind of like a room, and he's got some of his favorite earthly belongings with him. So it's about 8 by 10 feet, and there are a couple of huge slabs on top. I didn't get out and look at it close, but I did a drive-by, so I know where it is, and it looks like the top slab was broken away. So if you go and find a grave, you can see, that's where I got the background. There is an Indiana University South Bend professor named Kevin Gillen, and he did a whole bunch of research on this guy and this grave. Census records show that Willard was born in either 1836 or 1837. He moved here to Mishawaka with his family when he was a teenager. Now, there's no photographs of him, but there is a picture when I went on Find a Grave of his brother, his older brother. He's not much older, so it probably looks pretty similar. Now, Willard was quite an eccentric. He dressed well, you know, to the hilt, but he sounds like he was a shaky, shady guy, and he definitely had an ego. He was definitely a narcissist. You'll hear why. Now look at this. Couple of interesting stones here. Yeah, these are the old ones, guys. Look at this one's blackened. Yeah. Definitely a piece of work he was. There was some quotations that they agreed he was pretty flashy. He wore diamond cuffs. He wore frock coats. Physically, he was very tall, dark, and he was complected with a big mustache. Now, very wealthy guy he was, and he had bought and sold property in the area, including Niles, Michigan. Real estate guy. Now, for hobbies and interests, what did he like? Well, he liked horses. He liked to gamble. But no one really knew where he got his money. He'd come into town and he would bring coaches and horses to trade and sell. He'd disappear for a while, then he would come back. nobody really knew where he got his money. Nobody really knew. I mean, he had real estate. It was like, how did he get the real estate? But he would do these trips, these kind of secret trips, and do these dealings. So, you know, there's a sense of shadiness to all of this. You know, was there murder involved? Was he stealing these things? Was he part of a gang? We'll never know. But you can use your own imagination and try to figure it out. There's a couple of articles, one that I found there on that Find a Grave link that apparently the professor found. One was the 1922 South Bend Tribune article. It said Willard was an atheist, a high-toned gambler, and some allege even worse things. Now, being a gambler is not bad. And it may be that he was, you know, like Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday, expert gamblers making money. And when I say expert in those days, I mean cheaters. But anyway, expert gambler. In the article, I get this, it says he was a typical Simon Legree. Now, Simon Legree, this is really a bad description. The book Uncle Tom's Cabin, there is, you know, the whole story, but there's the mean slave guy who is just greedy, horrible guy, Simon Legree. So it's like, wow, you put that label on old Willard here? That's not a compliment in any way. It's quite an insult, actually. So there has to be something to what I was even saying before. Brutality. He was tall of figure, dark and thin, and wore a Prince Albert coat. Fancy high-colored vest, black bow tie, and large diamond stud. High boots, in which he took special pride, and wide-brimmed hat. Altogether an austere personality. And, get this, I love this, he could swear like a trooper. So he was pretty foul-mouthed. Willard, as I said, would be, quoted in the article, he'd be gone from the city months at a time. And then he would return with a fine string of horses and sometimes coaches, which he would sell. Just where he secured these, no one was ever able to explain, but he always had plenty of money. But he was never known to work. So, talking about his grave, he died in midlife, it says in the article. He was suffering from tuberculosis, a slow death. He came to live with his mother in the early 1880s near what is now Lawrence and Main Street here in Mishawaka. And there he died. Now, he initially wanted to be buried in a rocking chair, reminiscent of Mary Bibb we talked about, the Huntsville. But there was another article there I saw in Elkhart's Daily Review on September 8th, 1882, which reads, "He is having a large stone vault built in the cemetery at that place," that would be here, "at one end of which his body after death is to be placed in a sitting position in a reclining chair. In anticipation of the latter event, he had constructed a vault 7 feet by 8 feet in size, surrounded by a stone wall 18 inches thick." Now that's really thick, guys. He also had his coffin made, and in such manner that when placed in it, he will be in a sitting position. Now this confuses me a little bit because, and we'll talk more about what some of the testimony was from back then. But if you're in a coffin, how could he be sitting? You'll see, we'll talk about the table and some other things. It's kind of like a room. Anyway, maybe he's in a coffin, maybe he's not. But the vault was to be lined with pictures of horse races and other sporting representations. And when he had been properly deposited in his sepulcher, it is to be covered with a granite block 8 feet by 10 feet in size and weighing 5 tons, which we will see here. We will see that. Willard Aldrich's strange request didn't end there, guys. He also wanted to be buried sitting up at a table with all his things with him. All his, it's kind of, you know, it kind of reminds me of the Egyptian burials, right? You King Tut, and they're in there with all their valuables and all their stuff that they're taking to the next life. Maybe he believed in that. This was before all of many of the discoveries, not all the discoveries, but King Tut, for one, was made. And the reason I mention that is because, you know, that became very fashionable. The Egyptian motif and architecture, and even got into entertainment, but no, he wanted to do that. So his whiskey, his saddle and boots, tobacco and matches, playing cards, and his shotgun was supposedly buried in there, sealed in there with him. So he had contacted a man named John Phaeton here, who was the well-known undertaker, and he had a special walnut casket constructed. And again, it's just, how could you be sitting in a chair? Maybe it's the casket with the chair in it with him reclining, and then it's set in there. I don't know, the table. Well, I'd really be interested to hear what you guys all think, but he had it says a special walnut casket constructed with gold handles and a glass front. And most notably, it was in an upright sitting position. So Willard Aldrich died midnight on September 7th, 1882. He was only 42 years old. And the newspaper articles from that time indicated the casket was too large to fit in a hearse. So there definitely was a casket. There definitely was a casket made. It was either carried or towed to the cemetery here, and people came from all over to see it. Just imagine, as we stand here, the hundreds of people that were here, maybe thousands of people. Who knows? They had heard about Willard's unusual requests, and they were curious to see this for themselves. Now, there were some letters found from him later. He said, "I'm not going to be buried with these things because I'm afraid people might try to rob it." Then he said to his friends, "Hey, sneak it in when nobody's looking." And I'm sure that's what they did. So let's go have a look at the famous tomb. Right over here. And there you can see a massive slab. And it looks like, yes, there were two of the slabs. One on top that's pretty much broken apart, and as I look here, it looks like the bottom slab is caving in. That thing is 9 inches, 10 inches thick. Probably no rebar, maybe rebar inside. Maybe that's what's keeping it from collapsing. And they have a little thing here, story about him. So let's see, eccentric, atheist, It says he often disappeared for months at home, tall and thin. So this looks like a repeat, yeah, of the stuff that we had found on Find a Grave. Very interesting. I wonder how deep it is. Probably 6-8 feet deep inside. What do you think, guys? I will tell you this, whatever's down there, whatever is left of him and his belongings, is probably just a small pile, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is, you know, it's underground, and we have this fallacy. We think that, you know, the cemetery's dry and you're buried in a vault in a casket, but many of the times, even though it's dry on top, it's below water table, or especially in rain, you're underwater the whole time. I've seen a lot of exhumations and crimes in modern caskets, and the whole casket, metal casket, is, we've done these episodes where they are underwater. So I'm going to tell you, I'll bet there's a lot of water down there, and maybe it probably goes up and down in level. But I'm just going to guess that there's not much left of him and his goodies, except for the shotgun. I'm intrigued with the shotgun. Just imagine if you go down there, the wood butt and the handle is going to be disintegrated, probably, or nothing much left of it. But the shotgun is probably down there, was probably leaning against the wall. It's probably laying in the corner. Who knows, right? Yeah. So there was another article that was written that closes the Find a Grave link. It says, as stated yesterday, it is the intention of those having charge of the ceremony to follow the strange wishes of the deceased to the letter. The friends of the deceased will see that his last wishes will be fully complied with at the funeral. So they did it. You got to imagine that he is down here, as was his wishes. So, you know, as I stand here and I look at this, I always try to imagine, like Mary Bibb, I was imagining what was she like, and I rendered the picture of her in the rocking chair maybe a few decades after her internment. Of course, now she's probably just a pile of, and that's probably what's here. But my mind always wanders to a decade or two, or many decades after his internment here, and you go down and you say, peel the rock away and let's look inside. And what did he look like? I'm sure now it's just a pile, if anything, of stuff, just goop. But just imagine, back in the day, what did it look like down there? What was the thing, the shotgun and the paintings, right? The paintings on the wall. Let's just try to imagine. That is the story of old Willard. Thank you, Kimberly. I couldn't wait to come out here. Just before I leave Chicago here, I'm about a week away, but I had to come do this, show you guys. I had to see it. Use your imagination and tell me what you think in comments. Tell me give me a description in your mind's eye. What are you seeing down there? I mean, that's what makes this all intriguing, right? It's here. We're seeing it, and I took you to it. Okay. See you all later. See you on the next one.